My boy made it for me.
Nice.
So yeah, first of all, we're standing on stolen indigenous Tongva land, right? This is.
Are you moving anytime soon?
Land? No, but
Why?
the fact of the matter is I'm born and raised California. We're talking about diversity, equity, and
Wait, hold on a minute. First of all, it's not true, right? If you think criticizing the country means you hate it and that should compel you to leave, then by that logic you're going for, Ben, you should have left the country years ago. Are you the one crying about, complaining about woke and lefties for years, like your whole show? I mean, how it's destroying America or things have gone upside down, in which case you should just move out, right? Going by your argument, wouldn't you agree? Secondly, the reason that's a dumb argument is because it's a complete contrast from what America was literally built on, being criticism and change. Why don't you tell the founding fathers to move out, huh? If they didn't like being taxed heavily or the direction the country was headed towards, right? The plethora of issues that, transpired throughout history, they should have just left the country. What about the civil rights leaders? What do you think the whole progressive era was for? Like, people love bringing up the Constitution, but did you know the Constitution wasn't built from scratch, right? It was meant to rectify or correct the flaws of the Articles of Confederations. Is he serious? You can't base your whole point on something that literally contradicts, right, history. It's America is what it is today, not because of one or two things, right? It's not because of one group of people, but because of all these varied changes and revolt throughout its history. Also, what if someone did generally hate the country to the core and still stay to reap its benefit? What are you going to do about it? Are you doing the same thing? I don't believe for a second that, Ben, like you nor most people who claim to be patriotic, for a second, like actually believe in that, right? Or you have a profound loyalty to this land. Let's be honest, because based on what a lot of these people advocate for, what I'm hearing, it's the complete opposite of the direction America has been headed towards for the past 100 or so. I mean, no, throughout its entire history. You're here to eat your cake, just like your family over there and your buddy over there, right? It's such an ignorant, dishonest take coming from someone who proclaimed to use facts, but misconstrue things on multiple occasions and leave out like context, because like he's not bringing up any so far.
We should.
So why don't we?
No, you
do it
shouldn't.
Today, right now.
No, that's not the response. Oh my God, he started this whole conversation with that premise, and now he's basically conceding, like, no, like, what do you mean you shouldn't? Like, what?
When we look at this country that is built off the backs of slavery and white supremacy, taking the lead, building the roots and foundations of everything that you know and believe today, it's ironic to see a black and Indian woman.
Wait, is he referring to Kamalaharris? I don't know, man, because regardless if you like Kamalaharris or not, the thing is, it's not exactly the type of person that I would paint as a victim. And even if you were to do that, it's on multiple sides. It's on both sides, right? It's not just right-wingers or Republicans that are bashing her. So I don't know if you want to go down that rabbit hole.
Who's rising up to the occasion against...
Because you can't just, put it on, one side, because this is not true.
And it's the fact that...
Can you give me an example of how society pushed Kamala Harris down?
Yeah, see, that's the problem right there. It's an easy clap for him. Like that wasn't a good one. He shouldn't have one for that.
Demographic of people is what I'm talking about.
Well, yeah, but you suggested that Kamala Harris is being pushed down by society.
I'm not suggesting that, no.
I mean...
Well, okay, yeah, I don't think you should have went for that.
Thing. Why is that a bad thing when for a long time in this country, I feel personally that white men have had an advantage over some communities that have been discriminated against. So why would you say that that is a destructive thing and not, making up for lost time?
Sure. So let me explain what I mean by diversity, equity, and inclusion. Mm-hmm. So the basic theory of diversity, equity, and inclusion is spelled out by people like Richard Delgado, who's sort of one of the founders of, for example, critical race theory, is that essentially disparities equal discrimination. That if you see
Wait, hold on a minute. No, that's a complete oversimplification, right? I don't know why he keeps doing this. Is he hearing himself? Disparity can have multiple causes, discrimination being one of them, right? But in a case like this, and in really any discussion of this caliber, context matter, right? Aren't people always bringing up context this, context that, but when it doesn't suit you, you want to leave it off. The context being history, right? Again, see, I don't think Ben would ever debate a competent historian because, I mean, his whole gibbering career would have ended right there. He obviously doesn't want that. But back to context being matter. Yes, based on what history has shown us, discrimination is one of, if not the definitive leading cause of disparities. you had segregation, redlining. You also had things like the Indian Removal Act, and of course the the war on drug policy. I believe is to be one of the more well known. I mean, it's all there in the book. Like I don't know why. Like you can bring up something so simple that's been well documented in history, right? But I mean, I'm sure he threw his freaking book away as soon as he entered the political arena.
Between one group in the United States and another group in the...
And honestly, I don't like what they're doing here. This channel, Jubilee, I believe, because this segment, right, of like one Republican versus 25 Kamala Harris voters, regardless if he comes on top on majority of these debates, it already like gives off the impression that he's a stand-up guy, right? It's there are people who see it like that, right? It's unfortunate, but or that he deserves credit for going up against the woke mob, or he's going up against the lefties, like he's brave and heroic or some bull crap. It's not a good look, especially if people can raise their flag to vote someone out. You don't need 5 or 20 people. You just need one competent person who know what they're saying, and trust me, that would make Ben squeal like a pig.
Theory is that essentially disparities equal discrimination. That if you see any disparity between one group in the United States and another group in the United States, that is the result of some exterior discrimination. It is not the result of individuals within that group acting differently. It's not the result of cultural differences. It's not the result of aggregated...
What? I literally just gave you the context behind why discrimination is the dominant cause, right, or leading behind disparities. Even if you want to bring up individuals, families, or cultures, whatever, not everyone has the same access to education and job opportunities due to what I just explained to you, right? As history has shown us, discriminatory policies, right, have long-lasting consequences beyond their initial years. Also, what family or culture value wants to be at a disadvantage? Care to explain, Ben? You got to bring up some like actual references or evidence, because he's talking so much, but he has zero backing, right? And he may not know this because he more than likely benefit from this far more than the average person's. It's like he has no basis or ground from which he formed these arguments. It comes off like he's speaking from such a privileged state of mindset. Like there's no point getting like in any discourse someone like him. Like despite how much he wants to preach facts and evidence, like he has in this whole video, like how many, like what's the minute here? Like we're 3 minutes in, right? But he says so much, but not a single, like he hasn't bring up a single evidence, right? No history. Right, he doesn't have context, right? Nothing. Like he simply doesn't understand, like, or clearly doesn't care about facts.
And that to me is a failure of logic. It also
is a failure of logic because you're missing context, historical context, which is literally what America was built on. And clearly, you have no substance in your argument, as Sykes just explained to you.
In that it separates group from group, particularly in the United States, on the basis of race, which is not the best way of actually bringing Americans together.
And he's nodding his head. Oh my God, I can't stand this guy. I don't know if they're like, maybe they're not allowed to interrupt, but it doesn't matter. Like, why are you nodding your head?
Do you think there's room for nuance, perhaps, though? Like, yeah, maybe not everybody, but there certainly has been a large sect of people that has had it harder because of the color of their skin or their sexuality or their gender identity. Could you acknowledge that maybe there's, a middle ground there where it's not all, but there is some people who certainly have had a disadvantage?
I will say that history has consequences, obviously.
That's
and that if
you're
talking about historic marginalization of particular groups, that has consequences. The problem
is... What policy? Give me an example, Ben. You can't just go on rambling without a reference.
Design policy in order to rectify for cosmic injustices or historic injustices, you actually have to try and measure out whether underperformance, say economically, is due to those historic injustices. If so, how much?
Historic injustices are based on historical policy that I mentioned a few times already, right? These were aimed at specific groups and affected some far more than others. Clearly, they can be and have been documented for decades. Like, what is he talking about? Does he not, like, has he done no research? Like, do you not know history, Ben? Right, no offense. I mean, maybe. Like, why is he asking how much when the consequences of discriminatory laws have been severe enough to the point it creates significant gaps, as data has shown us, like for decades, right? Like he's talking so much and moving around the topic, but there's zero substance or legitimacy behind his argument.
What is the corrective policy that is actually aimed at achieving best opportunity for all? The diversity, equity...
The corrective policy would be one that equals out the field. As for Pacifics, already we have, you can talk about housing opportunities, right? Educations, economic developments, or for disadvantaged communities. obviously you would want to study these issues more closely, given how difficult it may be to pass certain bills in Congress.
Inclusion policies that are directed at separating race from race and then benefiting one race, for example, at the expense of another, ignore the fact that there are individuals within those groups, that history does not fall on everybody equivalent, that frankly, genetics and intelligence don't necessarily fall as an individual level.
What?
Right? You and I, we don't look the same. We might have different heights. We might have different qualities.
What the is he talking about? You can't go from groups to now being individual levels, right? Of course, not every single individual is going to be equal, right? You can't bring up an outlier to dismiss historical context. Is he serious? He's bringing up generics and heights, and yeah, individuals were born with different physical and intellectual capabilities, but the opportunities available, to develop and utilize them are heavily influenced by social structures and historical contexts. Man, get the I can't stand this. I really can't. He's ignoring all logics and fact, right? The two things he wants to preach so much. Like, not once in this whole video has he ever referenced or even consider history, which is the single most important thing in a discussion like this.
That is just the way that God or nature has bestowed
this
skill sets on everybody.
What exactly? Are you serious? No, this isn't it. I can't stand this. It's actually very infuriating. It's.
Thank you.
So you believe that certain economic disparities between racial groups are caused as a result of cultural differences?
Sure.
And so what is the backing on this? What would you say contributes to your belief in that?
Okay, so not all cultures, for example, value studying in school the same. You can check this by the...
What? What culture doesn't value studying in school? What culture, Ben? I'm sorry. What evidence do you have? Let me answer that for you. There is none. No, there isn't a culture that inherently devalues studying in school. The differences in education across cultures and families are, if there's any, right? Typically, it's not because certain cultures simply don't value education. Rather, they stem from, more external socioeconomic or a systematic barrier that impact how certain people have less access to school and opportunities. How many times do I need to repeat this? What?
Amount of hours that kids of particular culture study. So
no, your argument was value, right? Just because someone spends more time studying, right? There are a lot of factors that go into this, right? It's not he's oversimplifying all of this, right? But his initial premise was valuing, right? Now he's going from valuing to some people study more or less. No, that depends on plethora of circumstances, right? You can't attribute that to them not valuing education or studying. Studying, right? That's what?
For example, Korean Americans study a
what
lot
kind
more
of
than, for
argument
example, Latino Americans in terms of the number of hours they...
Yes, because generally speaking, Korean Americans, they come from a place where education and school are far more accessible and supported, including they even have various programs such as tutoring, as far as I'm concerned, that were designed to help them achieve even greater academic outcomes, right? Also, I've never heard of Latinos not valuing education, even if the premise was that they don't study as much. Your argument was certain culture not valuing education, but now you're switching to some culture not valuing more than others based on the amount of time they spend studying. Again, you can't attribute simply that to your premise. It isn't that simple. That's a complete oversimplification. You're not taking into factors a lot of circumstances that would surround a person's life. What? And again, there's a difference between having no value and having some or more value, right? He keeps moving the goalposts.
The kids study. It would be hard to suggest what to attribute that to other than sort of parental guidance and what exactly the priorities are of the parents.
What? You absolute What do you mean hard to attribute that to none other than parental guide or study? Do you understand not every school and communities have they don't have the same funding, right, and resources? He's so intellectually dishonest and just it's numbing. And none of this, I don't know if they're allowed to interrupt, but they're not pushing
white people.
hard enough.
So when I talk about disparities between groups, you can talk about white Appalachia, and there are very different values with regard to studying than there are for, say, upper class white Americans who are living in Brooklyn, right? That's not the exact same thing. So cultural difference.
Appalachia? You mean the region that's characterized by what? It's between mountains? Weren't they relying on coal mining for employment? All right, hold on. Give me a second. Let me double check. Okay, it's time for fact check since, people want to use facts so much.
A few moments later.
Okay, yeah, I was right. Yeah, no, they rely heavily on coal mining for employments. And they're known to it's like you can literally look up, right, on Google. It isn't hard, Ben. Like you keep talking about facts, but clearly, right, you're not very informed because they're known to have economic hardship that does for the millionth time translate into having fewer resources. Like there's a literal article web for discussing this, right? Having less resources for school, less access to advanced educational opportunities. You're comparing that to upper class Brooklyn. What? Is no one hearing this? This in no way. In this whole video, and even though we're not even, I don't think we're even 10%, but he hasn't made a single factual point. Not one. Not based in context, not based in history, right? Not based in reality. Right? It's the comparison you can make, and it actually contradicts his point. Right? Girl, that's your ace in the hole. She needs to take this. She better use this against him.
Print that on and pretend that that's all the same. That's obviously not true. But
and she's nodding her
do
head.
explain
Oh
enormous
God, I
amount of
can't
group
stand
disparities
this.
across incomes. To take a perfect example, if you look at single motherhood rates, they're not equivalent across groups. Those are going to have massive differences with regard to outcomes for children. So if you're talking about cultural differences, again, cultural is just a rough way of saying how people
That's
act
not
within
what
a group
cultural
on a large
difference
scale.
necessarily
that is going
does.
to amount to
And
some
again,
generalization,
you're
but that generalization
oversimplifying, right?
is going
No,
to
it's that
tend
simple
to,
as I explained to you many
shall we
times at this
say,
point.
concur. It's going to correlate very highly with outcome.
But culture is acclimated over time. It becomes a thing over time. And so do you not think that these historical disadvantages that certain ethnic groups have been through over time has created this culture in which they're unable to put themselves ahead? You do say
Correct.
that Asian Americans are more likely to
Studious,
study. Yes.
Okay, so Ben, you knew that about Asian Americans, so why would you say this guy? Oh man.
But we have to take into account that after the Chinese Exclusion Act, Asian Americans were given a certain type of reparations, which allowed them into the country. And
Chinese
in order
What
for
were the
them,
reparations?
they were given visas, which allowed them to
that.
come into the. Yes, they were given easier
I understand,
processes
but
into visas. Yes,
visas are
which
not
allowed them
reparations.
into.
They'll confuse
No,
yourself,
it's a
Ben.
form of reparations, which they were once excluded from coming in. And so giving them an easier opportunity to attain these visas allowed them into the U.S.
Why is he raising his fact? Who's this looking white dude? Get him out of here.
And
Wait,
mainly the
why are they
individuals
raising
were
their
able to
flag?
attain those people with higher
No, she's
education,
railing
which
him.
is
What are
why
you
it
talking?
may seem that
What's going on here? What the
Asian
hell is
Americans
happening?
within the country who come in typically with higher incomes as well as higher educational backgrounds, it may come off as that they are more studious than Latino Americans. But what we have to take into account
Yes.
is that
No, she's just
Latin
absolutely-
America and Hispanic people have
getting on
faced
point.
a lot of
They're-
tremendous setback due to historical
So,
atrocities. It's not their culture.
No, it's not. Again, I don't know why, in what hellhole Ben got himself into that he keeps bringing up cultural difference and conflating it and oversimplifying it.
Per se, what you see within
Is there any individual agency in here, or is it all historic?
Individual agency? What? That proves you have no ground in your argument, Ben, because we're talking about groups and facts of matter. Individual don't amount to the same weight as groups. And generally speaking, right, even if we were to bring in individual agency, right, whatever the hell you want to go around, everything, including individuals, is influenced by external factors, right? You're basically conceding at this point.
Circumstance.
everything is based off of history. Everything
Exactly. Facts. That's, finally someone competent. What?
acclimates, everything is an
So-
accumulation
Yes.
of history.
So to take the single
So,
motherhood example, for example,
the way
What? Oh my
That's
god.
anyway.
Why are they raising their flags? She's carrying your whole incompetent. Oh. We're done. I'm good. All these people can go after them. We're done. I'm out. I can't stand this.